both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too.
Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Gung. It's November 1st, 2023. The topic is going to be the Israeli war against Hamas. And I know now, and you should know, that every episode I do will be on YouTube. So I'm going to introduce myself over again. I'm hoping to contact other people, new people. My name is Joseph Giannini. I'm 80 years old. I am a United States Marine Corps captain, retired. I'm a criminal defense attorney, retired. I've been doing this show a long time. Some of you know me, some of you know of me, some of you don't. So, like I said, I want to get this show out on social media as far as I can. Been thinking a lot about what's going on in the Middle East, and yesterday I read an article in the New York Times magazine, and it was titled, "I've been under bombardment," and by a woman by the name of Megan Stack. And what she was doing was she was arguing for a ceasefire, and she was trying to show people what it's like, or what it feels like to be under bombardment. And she described it as a horror. And I started thinking, my God, I had the same experiences in Vietnam, and I always called it terror. So she was describing like being under fire in Afghanistan, talking about bombs and artillery. So I want you to know that I have standing, to talk about the horror, the terror, about income, and I'll let you know just exactly what I'm talking about. In Vietnam in 1967 and 68, which turned out to be the deadliest years of the war, 1968 alone was the deadliest year. Over 100,000 American casualties, 15,000 plus killed, and 84,000 plus wounded. And that's just American casualties. The NVA and the Viet Cong probably suffered 100,000 KIAs, and the civilians probably suffered probably 150, 200,000 casualties. While we were fighting, we were always subject to different types of incoming bombardments. For example, artillery, rockets, mortars, and friendly fire, believe it or not, friendly fire. So every time you're under fire, and particularly when you have no control of what's going on, you're pinned down, or you're in an open field, or you're in a bunker and you can't move, and incoming is getting real close, it's terror. It's pure terror. You can't do anything. It's all luck. And every time this happens, every time, it's pure terror. And this is what's happening now in Gaza and in certain parts of Israel. These people that are being subjected to bombardments of rockets and bombs, they're experiencing terror, and they will never, never forget it, and they will have nightmares about it, probably for the rest of their lives. They'll be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And we're not talking about, Marines and soldiers. We're talking about old people, men and women. We're talking about young men and women. We're talking about teens. We're talking about toddlers and infants experience the horror, the terror, ongoing. So you might say, I feel empathy for what's going on. Doesn't matter whether they are Palestinians or Israelis. I feel for both of them, or all of them. Let me back up a little bit. what's happening over there right now is the Gazans are being relentlessly bombed, and the Israelis now are using what they call bunker busting bombs. Uh, I guess the slang or the colloquial is the mother of all bombs. All these bombs were made here in the United States, and they were made to take out bunkers, mostly bunkers in hills and in mountains, jungle terrain. But the Israelis are using them, I think, exclusively in urban areas. They weren't meant to be used that way in urban areas. Uh, it becomes, or it is a war crime to use these bombs in areas because the collateral damage, what a phrase. Every collateral damage is a person. That's what's going on. The casualties are catastrophic. And using these bombs, our bombs that we gave the Israelis is a war crime. Now, where does this come from? About war crime. My dad always said to me, there's no such thing as black and white. It's always shades of gray. And we have a little history, the United States, in using bombs to kill people massively. For example, I'm going to give you a little history. You must know that up until the end of the Vietnam War, we were using napalm on the Vietnamese. And it turned out that we killed more innocent civilians than Viet Cong and NVA. And a lot of it was done with aerial bombardment. Napalm, we're the good guys with the white hat, was developed by us in 1943 at Harvard. It was developed to destroy German cities. Germans, not the Nazis, out fighting, the Germans in their cities. And the first time we used napalm, which is a firebomb, was on Berlin. Then we, the good guys, we went in and we started a bombing campaign against Japan. And it was a firebombing campaign led by General LeMay. And we went in and we firebombed 65 Japanese cities. And we did 900,000 or over 900,000 innocent people. For example, these are things that I learned, recently, like say, within the last maybe 15, 20 years, maybe less. I watched John McNamara. He was our defense secretary during part of the Vietnam War. And I watched him being interviewed in a documentary called The Fog of War. And he confessed. He said that we determined, or we decided to kill as many Japanese civilians as possible, and we did. And if we had lost the war, the United States had lost the war, he would have been prosecuted as a war criminal and executed. How's that? The point is, the winners are never held accountable. They get away with all kinds of war crimes. Anytime you kill an innocent person, that's a murder. Even in the time of war, revenge and vengeance, they are not defenses to murdering an innocent civilian during war. What's going on now is every person that's killed by the Israeli, the IDF, they are being murdered. It's a war crime. Maybe go on some more. All right. I call it a one-sided war. The Israelis probably are probably the third most powerful nation in the world right now. And the irony is that the Israelis wanted a state, and they got their state in 1948 because they wanted to be someplace where they could be secure, where they could be safe. And it turns out, whatever it is, over 50 years later, 60 years later, they're not getting what they really wanted: peace, security, a place to raise their families. It's not working out for them. Uh, and it turns out, again, a lot of history. Turns out the Israelis, when they wanted a state, they were, some of them, not all of them, were terrorists. They killed innocent people with bombs to get that state. Um, they started a bombing campaign. They bombed a hotel, the St. George Hotel, before they were deemed a state, and they killed about 240 innocent people in one bombing. See, there's nothing black and white. Israelis were terrorists. Well, actually, they engaged in terror. Anybody that engages in terror, we deem them a terrorist. But terror is just another form of warfare. Terrorizing the enemy, trying to break their will to get what you want. The Israelis have done it. We do it all the time. It's terror. For example, right now, there is evidence that the Israelis are using white phosphorus artillery on civilian targets over urban areas. You know, I haven't been speaking lately. I've been off air so long that I'm having a problem speaking. All right, but I'll keep going. Back in 2008, the Israelis went and invaded or attacked Gaza. It was called Operation Cast Iron. They called it an operation, but they attacked Gaza. And they went in and they were caught using Willie Peter or white phosphorus rounds. That's a war crime. And here's a photograph. Can you get in on this one? Here's a photograph. That's an artillery round exploding over the city of Gaza, raining down white phosphorus on innocent people. The Israelis did that. They were our rounds. Our rounds. We gave them to the Australians in the 1980s. Here's another photograph. These are artillery rounds, white phosphorus rounds exploding over a United Nations school in Gaza, killing innocent people. The Israelis did this in 2008, Operation Cast Iron. They got caught. And the human rights organization, I guess, they wrote a long report. Hold it, I got it. Human Rights Watch. They came out with a report detailing what the Israelis did to the Gazans in 2008. It was merely an operation. And they used our rounds. And not only our rounds, they used our artillery. We gave them I call tracked 155 millimeter cannons. They're using them right now. We're giving them maybe millions of rounds, 155 millimeter rounds. Some of them are white phosphorus rounds. It's a crime to use them, a war crime. Again, no black and white, because our Marines in the Battle of Fallujah used the same type of ammo, the same type of round. I never saw anything like that in Vietnam. We have plenty of weapons of mass destruction. We had B-52s that could carpet bomb. We had 1,000-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs. We had napalm. We had all kinds of weapons that inflicted horrible casualties. The Israelis did not learn a lesson. They were never held accountable. They got away with firebombing Gazans back in 2008. They're getting away with it now. No one is saying a word. The Marines in Fallujah got caught. That was back in, I think, 2004. How'd they get caught? Because somebody was watching what they were doing, a photojournalist, and he observed something and he took video of it. And all of a sudden they realized Marines were using these white phosphorus artillery rounds over the city of Fallujah. It was a war crime. They got away with it. We got away with it. No one was ever held accountable. That's exactly what's going on right now. The Gazans are being massacred. Remember this, they called it the Israeli war. The only adversaries on the field, the only adversaries that have a war machine are the Israelis. The Palestinians, all the Palestinians don't have one tank. They don't have one artillery piece. They don't have one plane to deliver these bunker buster bombs. They don't have one ship. They don't have one ship. They don't have any helicopters. They have basically small arms. They're equipped like the Viet Cong were equipped in Vietnam. Actually, not as well equipped. They have some anti-tank weapons. They have no surface-to-air missiles, shoulder-held surface-to-air missiles that we gave the Mujahideen in Afghanistan during that war. Getting close to an end here. Oh, remember this. In Vietnam, you probably don't, the Soviets and the Chinese gave the Viet Cong and the NVA weapons. And the North Vietnamese had surface-to-air missiles, and they knocked down 5,000 American planes, 5,000 fixed-wing planes with surface-to-air missiles over North Vietnam. They didn't have the same capability in South Vietnam where they were fighting us. They didn't have the shoulder-held Stinger missiles. We gave those shoulder-held missiles to the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. That was a game changer. Once they started knocking the Soviet fighter jets and helicopters out of the air, that was it. The Soviets lost the war. We lost the war in Afghanistan. It took 20 years. If the Soviets have given the Mujahideen, who are the Taliban, if they had given them those weapons at the beginning of the war, we would have lost the war in a few years, because they'd have been knocking down our fighter jets, our bombers, our helicopters. The Soviets never did that. They could have. They never did. Even though we gave the fighters in Afghanistan fighting against the Soviet those weapons. So, yeah. All right, where am I going from this now? It turns out that the most powerful nations in the world are able to inflict the most massacres, the biggest massacres, the most mass killings. And we have done it better than anyone. And no one has ever been held accountable. I'm talking about our leaders. No one has been held accountable. We have waged wars. When I say we, not Americans, our government has started wars in Afghanistan. Over 20 years, no one held accountable. In Iraq, another 20 years or close to 20 years, no one held accountable. And remember this, but when a nation goes to war, it's not the people that go to war. Americans don't go to war, their government goes to war. When Germany went to war, it wasn't the German people that went to war, it was the Nazis that went to war. They declared war. Our government declares war. Our government starts wars without even declaring war. Like in Korea, we called it a police action, and then we didn't win there either. It's still an open war, believe it or not. There's an armistice. We did not win in Vietnam. We never declared a war in Vietnam. It was just another conflict. We didn't declare war in Afghanistan or in Iraq. They were not declared wars, and no one was held accountable. That's the way it's been, and it's going to be this way again. I don't know how. How do you stop the Israelis from slaughtering, from massacring innocent civilians? Now, I know everybody's up in arms. What Hamas did, the Israelis, they were deemed to be the most sophisticated fighting force in the world. Sophisticated surveillance and drones, everything, informants, and they missed out. They dropped the ball. It had to be for maybe a year or two, and they were surprised by one big operation that killed a lot of people, and all of a sudden they've turned it into a war, and they're determined to kill as many as they want, And the sad thing about it is that too many of us, Americans and Israelis, feel that way. They want revenge, they want vengeance, and they want to kill as many of Gazans as they can. That's insane. Because right now, I think we're getting close to we are. Yes, it's our weapons. And we are controlling what's going on over there. There will be no ceasefire unless we say there's going to be a ceasefire. It's not going to happen. And why is that? This is the most despicable part of it. Biden says no ceasefire. And he must realize that sooner or later, well, the Gazans know they're being slaughtered, they're being massacred by our weapons. The Israelis are using our weapons, and they have no defense to it, nothing. And we are controlling the battleground, the battlefield, war. We are. The U.S. government is controlling what is going on over there. And what is controlling the U.S. government? This is the worst part. It's politics. Our government is supporting the Israeli government in this massacre, in these mass killings, because our government, our politicians, the ones in control, are kowtowing to the vote over here. Is that despicable? The vote over here. It happens over and over again, even with Lyndon Johnson. He didn't want to be the first president to lose a war. And he was ignorant enough, not stupid, ignorant enough to get himself bogged down in something that was very minor when he came into the presidency. There were 16,000 Americans in Vietnam. By the time he left, there were 550,000 Americans in Vietnam. And the war would kill him at the age of 62. So we do things for the wrong reasons. Not Americans, our politicians do things. And it comes down to that. Biden wants to win the next election. Trump wants to win the next election. They're going to kowtow down to the Israelis. And they're doing it. Remember, there was Trump. that let the Israelis, they got the green light to shift their capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And we shifted our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And, another thing that I found out by reading, there's been a number of wars in the Mideast. Remember the Israeli, when the UN said, recognize them as a state, there was a war. They only recognized Israel as a state. They didn't recognize a Palestinian state. There was a war in 1948. There was a war in 1973 when the Arabs attacked 1967, excuse me, when the Israelis attacked the Egyptians. That was a surprise attack. And it's during that war that the Israelis annexed the West Bank and Gaza. That's when and Jerusalem. During the war, the 6-Day War, the war that they started, they annexed those lands. And they occupied those lands. That's a war crime. And they keep pushing and pushing. And now the settlers are determined to get rid of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And now the Israelis want to basically get rid of the Gazans if they could. These are all war crimes. And I only have a few seconds, right? All right. I'm sorry I got tongue-tied on occasion, but I'm not used to speaking so much. All right. Bye-bye.